Hello students, we are going to continue on in the chapter 2 section 3.1 notes. The next title there is elements of culture. So you'll notice that this is on my screen, it's all in red here because it is information that you are not specifically going to find in the textbook. You will only find here within the lesson, and you'll add that information into your notes as we go through all of this information. So last time in our notes, we listed out the 8 elements of culture, and we are going to specifically spend more time on religion and government and economy specifically, but then we're also going to talk about the other elements of culture in a little more general sort of terms. So we're going to start here with one of the elements of culture, which is social groups. And number 1, what are social groups? They're different groups of people in society. Now, some of these things are things that are fairly common sense, but we're going to put this information down so you have it to use in the future. Number 2, what is social status? And social status relates to a person and their importance or their rank. So for example, someone could be considered to be wealthy as their social status, or middle class, or blue collar. Social status typically is based on money, and that's what we're talking about here. Number 3, what is the most important social group in all cultures? So all cultures see family as their most important social group. Now there are 2 types of families that we have. One is called the nuclear family. And the nuclear family means that is the people who are the closest to us. So we also call this our immediate family. So it would be our mom and our dad. If we have any siblings, so maybe you have all brothers or maybe you have all sisters, you have a sister and a brother, those are your immediate family, your nuclear family. Usually these people all live in the same house until they are grown adults, and then they typically go their separate ways. But this is typically who lives in the same house together. And the other type of family that we have is called the extended family. And our extended family are our grandparents, our aunts and our uncles, our cousins, people who we are related to, but usually don't live in the same house. Now, I say usually, right? Because there definitely are people who have their grandparents that live with them, or aunts or uncles that live with them, or cousins that live with them. But usually your extended family live in a separate household from you and your nuclear family or your immediate family. Number 4 is to define ethnic group. So an ethnic group is a group that shares the same language, history, religion, or physical traits, meaning the way that they look. Some of the things that they have the same are certain looks about them. Number 5, ethnocentrism. We're going to define this word. And this is the belief that your own culture is better or superior to others. Now, people who have this, that are ethnocentric, they just don't know typically about other people's cultures. But this is something that is not really uncommon either, for people to believe that their culture is better than someone else's. And so number 6 actually kind of was talking a little bit about that already, is the reason why people are ethnocentric is typically ignorance. And ignorance just means that they don't know about other cultures, okay? That word ignorant doesn't mean someone is stupid. If you've heard this term before, if someone is ignorant, it just literally means that it's information that they don't know. So many people are ignorant on many topics. You could probably, let's see, you could talk about mechanics with me, right? Maybe working on an engine or something like that. I am totally ignorant when it comes to information about how to work on an engine of anything. I don't know anything about mechanics of engines and how they work and what needs to go into that. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It just means that I don't know about it. So could I learn it? Absolutely, I could. Are you going to learn things that that everybody knows? No, you're not. You're never going to know everything that everybody else knows. So there's always going to be things that you are ignorant about that you just don't know. And it simply means that you haven't learned it. It doesn't mean that you can't learn it. Sometimes people use that term as derogatory or a negative, that you're ignorant. And it could be in some cases negative, but it's really not intended to be a negative word. It just means that it's something that you don't know. I'm going to leave that there for a moment longer in case you need to finish typing any of that information before we move on to our next element of culture. Okay, so our next element of culture you will see on your notes there is language. And here we're going to finish the sentence that sharing language is the strongest unifying force for a culture. And that should make sense, right? We have more ability to bond with people within our culture if we speak the same language. If we had too many languages within one group, it's going to be definitely hard for us to share other things because we don't understand each other. So this is the strongest thing that brings a culture together, is their sharing of language. Number 2, a single language. If you only speak one language, you are monolingual. Now, I am not fluent in any other language, so technically I am monolingual. That is really what determines on whether or not you are monolingual or not, is if you are fluent in another language. And that means that you can speak it as well as understand it easily. I know a little bit of Spanish. I took Spanish when I was in high school and in college, so I do know some Spanish, but I am not fluent in Spanish. So it's definitely not a language that I would be comfortable speaking on a regular basis. And I know a few words from other languages, but that's it. I would not be able to travel to another country and immerse myself and understand what was going on because I really only speak fluently English. Multiple languages is when you speak many languages, you are called polylingual. Poly means many, and you might recognize that term from math. If you have a polygon, it has many sides to it. So a polylingual speaks many languages. And if you speak 2 languages, you are bilingual. And we have a lot of people in our school who are bilingual. We have our dual language program, which dual also means 2, right? So a lot of people speak both English and Spanish, especially in our school, but you can be bilingual or polylingual with whatever languages there are out there. So you could be bilingual with English and Japanese, or English and Portuguese, or English and Scottish. I mean, there's tons of different countries and different languages, right? And if you could speak all of those, Japanese and Portuguese and English and Scottish, that would make you polylingual. Now, we also have this word called dialect that has to do with language. And dialect is a local form of a language. It has their own vocabulary and pronunciation. So it may be the same word or the same term meaning, but it might sound a little bit different. Dialect also you can sometimes refer to when you're thinking about a person that to you sounds like they have an accent. That can also fall under dialect. It sounds in a certain way when they pronounce words, and they're pronounced different in different languages. So like, for example, people who are from Mexico and speak Spanish, that is Mexican Spanish, sounds different than the people who are from Puerto Rico and speak Puerto Rican kind of Spanish. And then we also have Spain kind of Spanish that's also different. So most of their words are very, very similar, but they are pronounced a little bit differently in each one of those countries. But it's still Spanish. Our next element of culture is history. And history shapes how a culture views itself and the world. Stories about challenges and successes develop pride and unity within a country. One of the things here in the United States that we tend to bond over specifically are when we have these big challenges that happen in our country. So like September 11th, 2001, we had a terrorist attack on our country. And that is a piece of our history that brought people together to share more pride and unity for the United States. And all cultures are going to have something like this that brings people together and gives them pride about their culture. I'm going to, again, leave that there for a moment in case you need to continue typing that information before we move on to the next element of culture. So our next element of culture is daily life. And we're going to talk about just a couple different things here in daily life. What basic human needs reflect your culture? So things like food and clothing and shelter. Different cultures have different types of staples that they have in their food that they're known for, different types of clothing, and of course, different types of shelter. You are going to see a little bit of this information with some examples of different types of specific foods that are used in countries. And you probably know some of this too from your own culture in your house, whatever culture you are, besides the American culture, you have those traditions, right? And that's things that are going to fall under all of these elements of culture are a lot of times what we see as tradition in our culture. And so different specific kinds of food, different types of clothing that are typically worn, and then the types of shelter that people use. And then we have this word called social mores. So social mores are daily rules of behavior, and these differ from culture to culture, and they're usually enforced by peer pressure. So a couple easy examples would be how to act and what to wear. So in certain places, you are expected to act in a certain way. I'll go ahead and give this example of church. If you are a religious person and you go to church, you are probably expected to be on your best behavior from your parents, to not yell really loud when you're inside a church, to not use any kind of profanity or cuss words when you're inside of church. And typically also, and this isn't everywhere, but again, these are some kind of like old traditions for religion. When you go to church, a lot of times people refer to it as like wearing your Sunday best, right? You get dressed up. You girls a lot of times wear dresses. Sometimes boys and men wear suits. So you try to look good for going to a church because you're expected to act or behave in a certain way as a daily rule of behavior, a social more. And again, there's no rule, right, that says you have to do those things if you went to church. It might be a rule in your house. It might be a rule that your mom and dad say, but the church isn't typically going to make that rule, and there's no law. So if you went to church and you, happen to yell, you're not going to be arrested. If you were wearing jeans and, tennis shoes to church, it's not something that they're going to ask you to leave the premises. So these are just sort of things that we are expected to do, and we feel that pressure from other people. If everybody else is doing it, then we probably will be doing that too, or really close to that. And then we have taboo. And a taboo is a bigger idea of right or wrong that's usually enforced by law. Now, again, it doesn't have to be, but most of the time it is. So things like murder, rape, kidnapping, abuse, stealing, these are all things that are taboo. They are things that should not be done. And not only because they are laws, but because they're wrong. So a taboo are things that are wrong to do, that are unethical, could be a way to look at that, but usually they're also actually against the law. You could probably come up with an example of something that is taboo, that is not actually illegal, but I feel like that's a harder thing to come up with. So usually a taboo is something that's illegal or against the law. And most of these things are going to be similar culture to culture. We'll wait a moment for you to finish that. So we have one last element of culture that we're going to cover right now, and that will be 5 elements of culture, and there's 8 total. So remember, I said we're going to talk about these, and then we're going to spend more time talking about religion and government and economy. So 3 of them that we're going to spend more time getting more detail about. So one more, our 5th element of culture here is arts. And again, we're going to complete this sentence. Arts and literature are ways that are used to express ideas, emotions, and information. And examples, and they gave some examples in the text when I read this in our last lesson, music, painting, sculpture, dance, literature. There's tons of stuff that fall under the arts, right? So through these different types of arts, we can express ideas, we can share our emotions, we can share information. Typically, I would say it shows a little bit more of ideas and emotion than anything else. Emotion is probably one of the biggest ones that we get through art. But especially think about music, and music, not even music that has words in it. Music that has words in it obviously can share ideas and emotions and information fairly easily because it's using language. But music without words in it can also give us a feeling of emotion. If something is really, we get a feeling of sadness when we hear music that's really low and slow, and it just sort of sounds sad. And then we think about maybe more happy or energetic when music is a lot faster, it's upbeat, or it's really loud. Those are feelings that we get when we hear music. And do you get emotional feelings every time that you look at a painting, or that you hear music, or that you read literature? Not necessarily. These things are going to hit people in different ways for every single one. And you might be way more into painting than you are into dancing. You might want to go to the museum and look at paintings to get these feelings and get some ideas, rather than go and sit and watch a ballet or go and sit and listen to an opera. Those are maybe not your thing. So it just depends. And then art is going to help express a culture's value and help unite a culture. So again, they are giving us these ideas and these emotions within these different types of arts. And they're going to let us see how a culture is united and how they value things. And then lastly, the arts can also tell stories about important figures and events. Now, I have played you lots of videos so far this year, and I will continue to do so. But I will also do that when you are in U.S. history in 8th grade. You'll also see a lot of videos about important figures specifically, and some of them have music put to them, and some of them are within literature. Some of them are going to be paintings or photographs of them. So these are other ways that we can tell stories about important figures and events that take place within our culture. I'm going to leave that there for another couple seconds to make sure that you have all that information. So this takes us to the end of lesson 3.1 notes.